Okay, let's just dive right in. If you've ever found yourself in a meeting where everyone seems incredibly busy, but somehow nobody's really accountable for anything, well, this explainer is for you. We're talking about ownership, that thing that's so hard to pin down, the quality that so many organizations are desperate for even when they think they have all the right processes in place.
I mean, does this sound familiar? This hits home for so many teams. It's the core problem, right? You can have all the stand-ups, all the sprints, all the frameworks in the world, but if that true gut-level sense of ownership isn't there, projects just kind of drift, deadlines get fuzzy, and the results, well, they suffer.
So here's our game plan for today. First, we're going to pull back the curtain on what I call the ownership illusion. Then we'll get really specific about where things typically break down. After that, we'll talk about why this is fundamentally a culture issue, not a framework issue. And then we'll get into the good stuff, concrete strategies for actually designing real ownership. To wrap it all up, we'll look at the massive role leaders play in all of this.
All right, so let's start with a little story. I want to take you inside a project that, from the outside looking in, looked absolutely perfect, like textbook agile. It seemed to have all the right pieces in all the right places.
Just picture this scene, okay? The daily stand-ups, they were crisp, they were efficient. Sprints were planned down to the minute. The backlog was this beautifully curated thing, and every single agile ceremony happened like clockwork. Seriously, on paper, it was flawless. The roles were defined, the process was followed to the letter, and it created this really powerful illusion that everything was humming along perfectly.
But, of course, the release slipped. And when they all got together for the postmortem, those two simple questions on the screen just hung there in the air. Silence. No one had a clear answer. Everyone had an explanation, sure, but nobody, and I mean nobody, owned the actual outcome. And that right there, that's the gap we're talking about, the huge, massive canyon between just having a role and truly owning a decision.
So where does it all go so wrong? You know, it's not usually some big, dramatic explosion. It's more like a death by 1,000 cuts. It's a series of these tiny, almost invisible leakages, where responsibility gets spread so incredibly thin that ownership just evaporates.
And make no mistake, this is not a small problem. The data is, well, it's pretty shocking, actually. Studies have shown that only 16% of employees feel a strong sense of ownership at work. Just let that sink in. That means for the other 84%, there's this constant haze of ambiguity about who's really on the hook for getting results. That's a whole lot of leakage.
Now, what's so fascinating here is the contrast. You look at the left column. We are amazing at tracking tasks. Stand-ups, sprint velocity, releases. We got metrics for all of it. But then you look at the right, the stuff that actually holds up projects, the unmade decisions, a scope freeze that never quite happens, a tough trade-off that nobody wants to make, a priority conflict that just festers for weeks. We track the activity, but we avoid the decisions.
So why does this happen? Well, an old idea called Conway's Law gives us a huge clue. It basically says that the systems and products we build end up being a mirror image of how we communicate as an organization. Think about that. Every single handoff between teams, every single department silo, it becomes a point where ownership gets watered down.
And this right here shows that dilution process perfectly. You start with a clear, powerful strategic idea. It gets handed off and becomes a flat list of requirements. Then those real business goals get chopped up into user stories. Those critical, tough trade-offs that need a real decision, they just get labeled impediments and tossed in a backlog. By the time the work gets to the people actually building the thing, all that vital context about why they're doing it is just gone.
And that brings us to the absolute heart of the matter. We've been looking at all the symptoms, but now we have to talk about the root cause. Because this is not a process problem you can fix with a new framework. It is, and it always has been, a culture problem.
Let's be super clear about the difference. A role, that just describes what you do. It's about activities. Ownership? That defines who answers the phone at 2 in the morning when everything is on fire. It requires both the authority to make the call and the accountability for how it turns out. You see, frameworks give you roles. Only culture can give you real, true ownership.
And the type of culture makes all the difference in the world. A Theory X culture, one that's built on control and a deep-seated assumption that people are just trying to avoid work, that is pure poison for ownership. You can slap agile ceremonies on top of it, but it's just a house of cards. Real ownership can only grow in a Theory Y culture, one that's built on a foundation of trust and the genuine belief that people want to take on responsibility.
So, how can you diagnose where your own culture is breaking down?
The skill-will matrix is a fantastic tool for this. It really helps us unpack why incredibly talented, capable people sometimes just don't step up and own things.
Now, the most dangerous spot on this matrix, it isn't low skill, low will. That's usually pretty easy to spot. No, the real danger zone is high skill but low will. This is where you have brilliant people who are amazing at executing tasks, but they won't push back on an unclear requirement. They won't raise their hand when priorities feel wrong. And their will isn't low because they're lazy or don't care. It's low because the culture hasn't created the psychological safety they need to speak up and truly own the outcome.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time diagnosing the problem. Now let's switch gears and get into the solutions. How do we start to intentionally design a culture where real ownership can actually grow and thrive? Let's look at some practical strategies you can use.
So many of us have seen a RACI chart, right? Responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. It's great for mapping out activities, but it often leaves the most important thing kind of fuzzy. Who has the authority to decide? This is where the RAPID framework makes a crucial shift. It stops asking, who does the work, and starts asking a much more powerful question, who decides? RAPID makes everything incredibly clear. It defines who recommends a course of action, who needs to formally agree, who performs the work, and who provides input. But the absolute game changer, the part that makes all the difference, is making it crystal clear who holds the D, the single accountable person who makes the final D decision. That clarity is the absolute bedrock of ownership.
And that D is so important because of this. Let me tell you, the single most toxic, morale-destroying pattern in any organization is making someone accountable for an outcome, but then stripping them of the authority to make the decisions that drive that outcome. That's not ownership. That's just setting someone up to fail.
So if you're a leader, you can start making these changes, like tomorrow. Start making trade-offs obvious and explicit for everyone. Stop just tracking how fast you complete tasks and start tracking how fast you make decisions. Add a key decisions needed section to every status review. And maybe most importantly, start rewarding people for good judgment and for having the courage to make a tough call, not just for how fast they execute. And this all brings us to our final, and frankly, our most important point. Because no framework, no process, no new tool is going to make up for the single most powerful force shaping your organization's culture, the day-to-day behavior of its leaders. I absolutely love this quote. It says everything. Your team isn't really guided by your fancy burn-down charts or your velocity metrics. They are guided by the clarity, the consistency, and the courage of the decisions you make. Clear decisions are what create real momentum. Dashboards just track the movement.
And at the end of the day, culture isn't what you write in your company handbook or what you put on posters on the wall. Culture is what you do. Your teams are always watching what you as a leader do. If you model clear decision-making, if you grant real authority, and if you take accountability yourself, guess what? Your team will too. The transformation has to start with you.
So, I'll leave you with this final thought. The true character of your team's culture, it isn't really defined by the tasks you all complete. It's defined by the tough, important decisions you collectively avoid. And the only way to change that is to act. So my question to you is, what's that one critical decision you're going to stop avoiding and finally make today?